I thought I was living the dream until I heard Jessica whisper into her phone at 2 a.m. "Don't worry, Tyler. Ryan doesn't suspect anything. He's completely wrapped around my finger. If things don't work out with us, I'll just keep him as my safety net." The worst part. I was lying right next to her, pretending to be asleep, realizing that after 3 years together, I wasn't her boyfriend, I was her backup plan. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Ryan Martinez, and for 3 years I thought I was the luckiest guy in Austin. Jessica Chen was everything I thought I wanted: ambitious, beautiful, and way out of my league. When she agreed to move in with me after just 6 months of dating, I figured I'd hit the relationship jackpot. Looking back now, I realized she moved in because I paid the rent while she saved money for her real plans. It all started to unravel. On a Tuesday night in November, Jessica had been working late again, or so she claimed. I'd spent the evening designing a new logo for a client, waiting for her to come home so we could watch our show together. She stumbled in around midnight, claiming her boss Tyler had kept the whole marketing team late for a campaign review. Nothing unusual. Their Tyler Brooks was known for his demanding schedule at Summit Marketing Group. What was unusual was the way she clutched her phone when it buzzed, a secretive smile that crossed her face, and how quickly she dismissed whoever was texting her. When I asked if everything was okay, she just said work stress and headed straight to the shower. I thought nothing of it until that 2 a.m. phone call changed everything. The voice on the other end was unmistakably Tyler's, and Jessica's response made my blood run cold. She was planning her exit strategy, and I was nothing more than her insurance policy. As I lay there in the dark, pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. The late nights that had become more frequent. The way she'd been distant during our conversations, always checking her phone. How she'd stopped making future plans, with me deflecting whenever I brought up our anniversary or moving to a bigger place. I wanted to confront her right then, but something held me back. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe it was the part of me that still hoped I'd misunderstood. Instead, I did what any rational person would do at 2 a.m. I overthought everything. I replayed every conversation from the past few months, every time she'd seemed distracted, every excuse about working late. The pattern was so obvious now that I felt like an idiot for missing it. The next morning, Jessica acted like nothing had happened. She made coffee, kissed me goodbye, and told me she loved me before heading to work. That casual "I love you" felt like a knife twisting in my chest, because now I knew it was just part of her performance. I spent the entire day at Creative Pulse Design Studio, unable to focus on anything. My coworker Marcus Johnson kept asking if I was okay, but how do you explain that you've just discovered your entire relationship is a lie? That evening I decided to test my theory. When Jessica came home, I suggested we start looking at engagement rings. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. She froze for just a moment too long before forcing a smile and saying, "Let's wait until after my promotion review next month. I want to focus on my career right now." It was a perfectly reasonable response that would have satisfied the old Ryan, but now I could see the panic in her eyes, the way she quickly changed the subject to what we should order for dinner. Over the next few days, I became a detective in my own relationship. I paid attention to details I'd previously ignored. How she'd step out to take certain calls, the way she'd angle her phone away from me when texting. How she'd become suddenly interested in going out with her coworkers, specifically the ones from Tyler's department. Each observation confirmed what I already knew but didn't want to believe. The breaking point came the following Friday. Jessica told me she was going to a company happy hour and would be home late. Something in her tone made me suspicious, so I decided to surprise her by showing up with her favorite flowers. Summit Marketing Group's usual happy hour spot was downtown, just a few blocks from my studio. But when I got there, none of her coworkers were around. I called her and she answered with loud background noise, claiming she was at the bar. But I was standing in that exact bar, and she wasn't there. Drove around downtown for an hour before spotting her car parked outside Tyler's apartment building. The same building she'd pointed out months ago when we drove past it, mentioning that her boss lived there. Sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching the lit windows, until I saw two silhouettes embracing in what I assumed was Tyler's living room. One of them was unmistakably Jessica, so drive home was the longest 30 minutes of my life. I kept thinking about all the times I'd gone out of my way to make her happy, all the sacrifices I'd made, all the times I'd put her needs before mine. I'd turned down freelance projects that would have advanced my career because she said she needed more emotional support during stressful periods at work. I'd canceled plans with friends because she wanted quiet nights in. I'd even delayed applying for my dream job at a major design firm because she said the timing wasn't right for big changes. When she finally came home at 2 a.m., she had her story. Ready? The group had moved to a different bar, then to someone's apartment for after-party drinks. She smelled like cologne that wasn't mine, and had that guilty energy that people get when they're trying too hard to act normal. She asked about my day with an enthusiasm that felt forced, like she was overcompensating for her absence. That's when I realized I had a choice to make. I could confront her with what I knew, and probably watch her lie to my face, or I could wait and gather more information. The old Ryan would have immediately demanded answers. This probably would have created a scene. This maybe even would have begged her to choose me over Tyler. But something had shifted inside me during those hours of sitting in my car, watching the truth play out in someone else's apartment window. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't thinking about what Jessica wanted or how to make her happy. I was thinking about what I wanted, what I deserved, and what I was going to do about it. Realization was both terrifying and liberating. I'd spent so long being the perfect boyfriend, the reliable choice, the safe option, that I'd forgotten I had other options too. As Jessica fell asleep next to me that night, probably dreaming about her future with Tyler, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to fight for someone who saw me as a backup plan. Instead, I was going to become someone who would never be anyone's second choice again. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. While Jessica slept in, I made coffee and sat on our balcony overlooking downtown Austin, watching the sunrise paint the sky orange and pink. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what Jessica needed from me. I was thinking about what I needed for myself. I pulled out my phone and did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my contacts and scrolled to a name. I'd been avoiding Maya Singh, the CEO of Apex Digital Solutions. We'd met at a networking event 6 months ago, and there had been an undeniable connection. She'd even offered me a position at her company. But I'd turned it down because Jessica had convinced me it would be too risky to leave. Creative pulse. Maya was everything Jessica wasn't: direct, ambitious in an authentic way, and she had looked at me like I was someone worth pursuing, not someone worth keeping around, just in case. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it started with one simple decision. Instead of confronting Jessica about Tyler, I chose to focus on myself. That Monday morning, I walked into Creative Pulse Design Studio with a different energy. Marcus noticed immediately. "You seem different today," he said, looking up from his computer as I settled into my workstation. "Good different. What's going on?" I couldn't tell him the truth yet, so I just smiled and said I was working on some new opportunities, which wasn't exactly a lie. I'd spent the weekend researching Maya's company, Apex Digital Solutions, and I was impressed by everything I found. They were innovative, growing rapidly, and most importantly, they valued creative talent in a way that Creative Pulse never had. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Working late again tonight." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Don't wait up. The old Ryan would have felt disappointed, maybe even suspicious. The new Ryan saw it as an opportunity. I texted back a simple "okay" and immediately opened my laptop to draft an email to Maya. Writing that email was harder than I expected. How do you reach out to someone after months of silence without seeming desperate or opportunistic? I went through 7 drafts before settling on something straightforward and professional. I mentioned that I'd been thinking about our conversation at the networking event and wondered if the position at Apex was still available. I attached my updated portfolio and hit send before I could second-guess myself. Maya responded within 2 hours. "Ryan, I was just thinking about you last week. The position is still open, and frankly, you were my first choice." "Are you free for coffee tomorrow?" That simple response changed everything. Someone wanted me as their first choice, not their backup plan. The contrast was so stark, it almost made me laugh. Here was a successful entrepreneur making time in her schedule to meet with me, while my girlfriend of 3 years was making excuses to avoid spending time with me. I met Maya at Grind Coffee Co., the same place where Jessica and I had our first date. The irony wasn't lost on me, but instead of feeling sentimental, I felt liberated. Maya arrived exactly on time, wearing a sharp blazer and carrying a confidence that filled the room. She was beautiful in a completely different way. Than Jessica, there was an authenticity to her that I'd forgotten existed. "You look good," she said, settling into the chair across from me, focused. I like that in a potential hire. We talked for 2 hours about everything except Jessica. Maya outlined her vision for Apex, the projects they were working on, and where she saw the company going. She wanted someone to lead their creative department, someone who could bring fresh ideas and innovative thinking. The salary she mentioned was 40% more than what I was making at Creative Pulse. But more importantly, she was offering respect and genuine opportunities for growth. "I'll be honest," Maya said as our conversation wound down. "I've interviewed 12 other candidates for this position. None of them had your vision or your portfolio quality. The job is yours if you want it." For the first time in months, someone was pursuing me instead of the other way around. It felt strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. I told her I needed a few days to think about it, which she accepted gracefully. As we parted ways, she handed me her card with her personal number written on the back. "Call me when you're ready to stop playing it safe," she said with a smile that made my heart race in a way Jessica's hadn't in over a year. That evening, Jessica came home earlier than expected, and I could tell immediately that something was wrong. She was agitated, checking her phone constantly, and when I asked about her day, she snapped at me about being clingy. The old Ryan would have apologized and tried to make her feel better. The new Ryan just nodded and went back to reading. "What's that?" she asked, noticing Maya's business card on the coffee table. "A job opportunity?" I said casually. "Remember Maya Singh from Apex Digital Solutions?" She offered me a position leading their creative department. Jessica's reaction was immediate and telling. Her face went pale, and she sat down heavily on the couch. "You can't be serious about leaving Creative Pulse. That would be such a risky move right now." "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious about her reasoning. Because we have stability here. Why would you want to mess with that?" She was grasping for arguments, and we both knew it. "Maybe because I want more than just stability," I replied. "Maybe I want to actually grow professionally instead of staying in the same position forever." The conversation that followed revealed more about our relationship than 3 years of dating had. Jessica was terrified of me becoming more successful, more independent, more confident. She'd been keeping me in a comfortable but limiting situation because it served her purposes. When I was financially dependent on my modest salary at Creative Pulse, when I was grateful for her attention, when I believed I was lucky to have her, I was easier to control. But now I was talking about taking a leadership position at a growing company, about earning significantly more money, about working with someone who clearly valued my abilities. I was talking about becoming the kind of person who had options, and that scared her. "What about us?" she asked, and for a moment she sounded like the girl I'd fallen in love with 3 years ago. "What about us?" I echoed. "You're working late constantly. We barely spend time together anymore, and when we do, you're always on your phone. When was the last time you seemed genuinely excited to see me?" She couldn't answer that question because we both knew the truth. She hadn't been excited to see me in months. I'd become background noise in her life, a comfortable constant she could ignore while pursuing what really interested her. That night, I made the call to Maya and accepted her offer. I also made another decision that would have seemed impossible. Just a week earlier, I started looking for my own apartment. The next few days were a whirlwind of change. I gave my notice at Creative Pulse, much to Marcus's surprise and my boss's disappointment. I toured 3 apartments and put a deposit down on a 1-bedroom place in East Austin with exposed brick walls and huge windows that would be perfect for a home office. I started packing my personal belongings, keeping only what was truly mine, and leaving behind the things we'd bought together. Jessica noticed the changes immediately. She tried to convince me that I was making a mistake, I was being impulsive, that I would regret leaving the life we'd built together. But I'd realized that we hadn't built anything together. I'd built a life around her preferences and needs, while neglecting my own. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening when she found the lease agreement for my new apartment. I'd left it on the kitchen counter, not to be cruel, but because I was tired of hiding my decisions. "You're really leaving," she said, holding the papers with shaking hands. "I'm really living," I corrected her. "For the first time in 3 years, I'm making decisions based on what I want, not what I think will make you happy." That's when she broke down and told me everything. About Tyler, about how their relationship had been going on for 8 months, about how she'd been planning to leave me after she got her promotion and could afford her own place. She cried and apologized and begged me to give her another chance, promising to end things with Tyler and commit fully to our relationship. But here's the thing about self-respect. Once you find it, you can't unfind it. I looked at this woman who had been lying to me for months, who had been using me as her safety net while building a future with someone else, and I felt nothing but pity. Not for her, but for the person I used to be, the person who would have probably taken her back, who would have been grateful for the chance to prove himself worthy of her love. "Jessica," I said calmly, "you made your choice 8 months ago. I'm just finally making mine." I spent that weekend moving my things to the new apartment. Marcus helped, along with my sister Sophia, who had driven up from San Antonio specifically to support me. They didn't ask many questions, which I appreciated. They could see that this wasn't a breakdown, it was a breakthrough. The apartment felt like freedom. It was smaller than the place I'd shared with Jessica, but every item in it was something I had chosen. I set up my home office in the corner by the window, hung my own artwork on the walls, and stocked the kitchen with food I actually wanted to eat. On Sunday evening, as I sat on my new couch, watching the sunset through those big windows, my phone rang. It was Maya. "How's the new place?" she asked. "Perfect," I said, and meant it. "Good! I was calling to see if you wanted to grab dinner and discuss your first project." "Yeah, nothing formal, just 2 professionals sharing a meal and talking about work." The old Ryan would have overthought that invitation, would have wondered about her intentions and worried about mixing business with pleasure. The new Ryan just said yes. We met at a small restaurant in South Austin, the kind of place with local art on the walls and a menu that changed weekly. Maya had traded her business attire for jeans and a vintage band t-shirt, and she looked even more beautiful, relaxed, and casual. "You seem different," she said over appetizers. "Lighter somehow." "I ended my relationship," I told her, surprising myself with how easily the words came out. Turns out I was someone's backup plan, and I decided I didn't want to be anyone's second choice anymore. Maya nodded thoughtfully. "Her loss," she said simply. "Anyone who would treat you as a backup option clearly doesn't understand value when they see it." We talked until the restaurant closed, about work and life and dreams and everything in between. When she walked me to my car, there was a moment when we stood close enough that I could smell her perfume. When the attraction between us was so obvious that even the old Ryan would have recognized it. But instead of acting on it, I just thanked her for dinner and told her I was looking forward to working together. Because for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't rushing into anything. I was taking my time, making deliberate choices, and prioritizing my own growth over immediate gratification. As I drove home that night, I realized that Jessica had done me an enormous favor. By treating me as her backup plan, she'd forced me to discover my own worth. And now that I knew what I was worth, I was never going to settle for less again. Starting at Apex Digital Solutions felt like stepping into a completely different universe. Maya had assigned me a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Austin skyline. A team of 6 talented designers, and a budget that was triple what I'd had at Creative Pulse. But more than the physical perks, I felt respected. In a way I'd never experienced before. My first project was rebranding a major tech startup that was preparing for their IPO, the kind of high-profile work that Creative Pulse could only dream of landing. Maya introduced me to the client as our new creative director and the best designer in Austin, and I could see in their faces that they believed her. It was intoxicating to be valued so highly, to have my opinion sought and my vision trusted. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I was thriving professionally, Jessica's world was beginning to crumble. Marcus, who had remained friends with both of us despite the awkward situation, kept me updated on the drama unfolding at Creative Pulse. Apparently, Jessica had been calling my old workplace, asking if I'd left any designs behind, claiming she needed them for a client presentation. When my former boss refused, she'd shown up in person, desperate and demanding. She seemed really stressed, Marcus told me during one of our lunch meetings, like she was barely holding it together. Word is that Tyler's been avoiding her since you left. Guess he was only interested when he thought he was stealing someone else's girlfriend. The poetic justice of Tyler losing interest once Jessica was available was almost too perfect. She'd thrown away our 3-year relationship for someone who had only wanted her because she was unavailable. And now she was left with nothing while I was building something extraordinary. But the real validation came when Creative Pulse lost their biggest client. The company had been trying to land Meridian Industries for 2 years, and just as they were about to close the deal, Meridian decided to go with Apex instead. Maya had pitched them personally, using concepts that built on ideas I'd developed during my first week at the company. "This is what happens when you have real talent on your team," Maya said during our Monday morning meeting, sliding the signed contract across the conference table. Ryan's vision for their rebrand was exactly what they'd been looking for. The Meridian account was worth more than my entire annual salary at Creative Pulse. But beyond the money, it represented something bigger. I was no longer the guy who got passed over for opportunities. I was the guy creating opportunities. Word traveled fast in Austin's tight-knit design community. Within a month, I was getting calls from headhunters and former colleagues who wanted to grab coffee and catch up. People who had barely acknowledged me before were suddenly interested in my opinions and availability. The attention was flattering, but more importantly, it was proof that I'd been undervaluing myself for years. Jessica, meanwhile, was learning the hard way that actions have consequences. Sophia had run into her at a grocery store and reported that she looked terrible, exhausted, stressed, and apparently living in Tyler's apartment since she couldn't afford the downtown place we'd shared on her salary alone. Tyler had been demoted after someone reported him for inappropriate workplace relationships, and their romance had died as quickly as it had begun. The most satisfying moment came when Jessica finally reached out to me directly. She sent a long text message at 11 p.m. on a Friday, clearly after she'd been drinking. The message rambled through apologies, explanations, and finally a desperate plea for me to meet her for coffee so we could talk about everything. The old Ryan would have jumped at the chance, would have seen her reaching out as validation, as proof that she'd realized her mistake and wanted him back. But the new Ryan read her message and felt nothing but mild annoyance at the interruption to his evening. I was at Maya's apartment, helping her assemble furniture for her home office. We'd been spending more time together outside of work, ostensibly as friends, but with an undercurrent of attraction that we were both acknowledging but not rushing to explore. It felt mature and intentional in a way my relationship with Jessica never had. "Everything okay?" Maya asked, noticing me staring at my phone. "Just my ex trying to rewrite history," I said, showing her the message. Maya read it quickly and handed the phone back. "Are you going to respond?" "Already did," I said, showing her my reply. It was just 2 words. "I'm busy." Short and sweet, Maya laughed. "I like your style." What I didn't tell Maya was that I really was busy, not just with work, though the Meridian project was demanding and exciting. I was busy building a life that I actually wanted to live. I'd joined a gym and was working out regularly for the first time since college. I'd bought a motorcycle, something Jessica had always vetoed as too dangerous. I was taking weekend trips to places I wanted to see, eating at restaurants I wanted to try, and making decisions based solely on my own preferences. The freedom was addictive. For 3 years, I'd been negotiating every choice with someone else, considering how Jessica would react to everything from my haircut to my career moves. Now I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and the only person I had to please was myself. This newfound independence made me more attractive to everyone around me, not just professionally, but personally. I was getting attention from women in ways I'd never had before. Part of it was the confidence that came with success. But part of it was simply that I'd stopped being desperate for validation. When you're not frantically seeking approval, people naturally want to give it to you. Maya and I had been dancing around our mutual attraction for weeks when she finally addressed it directly. We were working late on a presentation for a potential client, just the two of us in the office, when she closed her laptop and looked at me seriously. "I need to say something," she began, "and I want you to know I've thought about this carefully." I stopped what I was doing and gave her my full attention. "I'm attracted to you," she said simply. "I have been since we first met at that networking event. I also respect you too much to complicate your life while you're still processing your breakup." Her directness was refreshing after months of Jessica's indirect communication and hidden agendas. "I appreciate that," I said, "and I'm attracted to you too. But you're right that the timing is complicated. So what do we do?" she asked. "We keep being honest with each other," I said, "and we don't rush anything." It was the most mature conversation about attraction I'd ever had. No games, no manipulation, no hidden meanings. Just two adults acknowledging their feelings and agreeing to handle them responsibly. That weekend, Jessica escalated her attempts to reconnect. She showed up at my apartment building, somehow having gotten my new address. When I refused to let her up, she waited in the lobby for 3 hours before security finally asked her to leave. She sent flowers to my office with a note that said, "Please forgive me." She even reached out to Sophia, trying to get my sister to convince me to give her another chance. Each desperate attempt only reinforced how right I'd been to leave. The Jessica I was seeing now, clingy and manipulative and willing to stalk and harass, was probably who she'd always been underneath the confident facade. I just hadn't been able to see it when I was so focused on earning her love. The harassment reached a peak when she somehow got hold of my work schedule and showed up. Outside Apex's building as I was leaving for lunch, she looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days. There was a manic energy about her that made me genuinely concerned for her mental state. "Ryan, please," she said, grabbing my arm as I tried to walk past her. "I made a mistake." "I know." "That now? But we were together for 3 years. Doesn't that count for something?" "It counted for something," I said gently, but firmly. "It counted as a lesson. You taught me what I don't want in a relationship, and for that, I'm grateful." "I can change," she insisted. "I ended things with Tyler weeks ago. I quit my job because working with him was too awkward. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove to you that I'm serious about us." The desperation in her voice was painful to hear, but it didn't move me the way it once would have. "Jessica, you didn't make a mistake. You made a series of choices. Over 8 months, you chose to start a relationship with Tyler. You chose to lie to me every single day. You chose to keep me around as your backup plan while you explored your other options. Those weren't mistakes. They were decisions that revealed who you really are." "That's not who I really am," she protested. I was confused. I was scared of commitment. "You were exactly who you chose to be," I interrupted. "And I'm choosing to be someone who respects himself too much to accept being treated as a consolation prize." That evening, I filed a formal complaint with building security about the harassment. I also blocked Jessica's number and all her social media accounts. It felt like closing the final chapter on a book that had already ended. Maya noticed the change in my demeanor immediately. "You seem lighter today," she observed during our morning coffee meeting. "I feel lighter," I admitted. I finally closed the door on my past, and now I can focus completely on my future. "And what does that future look like?" she asked with a smile that suggested she hoped to be part of it. "Bright," I said, meeting her eyes. "Really bright." That afternoon, we landed another major client, a restaurant chain that wanted to rebrand all 50 of their locations. It was the kind of project that would establish Apex as a major player in the Texas market in cement. My reputation as a creative director worth knowing. As I sat in my office that evening, looking out at the Austin skyline and planning the campaign that would define the next phase of my career, I realized something profound. Gosh. Jessica hadn't just made me her backup plan. She'd inadvertently made herself my emergency lesson in self-worth. and that lesson had been worth every moment of pain it took to learn it. 6 months into my new life, I thought I had everything figured out. My career was soaring, my confidence was unshakable, and Maya and I had begun exploring the romantic connection that had been simmering between us since day one. We'd taken things slowly, building a foundation of friendship and professional respect before allowing ourselves to fall into something deeper. It felt healthy and intentional in a way my relationship with Jessica never had. But life has a way of teaching you that just when you think you've mastered the game, there are still lessons waiting to be learned. It started with a phone call from my father, Carlos, on a Tuesday evening in April. I was working late at the office, finalizing presentations for 3 new potential clients, when his name appeared on my screen. My parents and I had grown closer. Since my breakup with Jessica, they'd never particularly liked her, though they'd been too polite to say so while we were together. Now they openly celebrated my newfound happiness and success. "Mijo," my father said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully." The seriousness in his tone made me close my laptop and give him my full attention. My father wasn't dramatic by nature, so when he sounded worried, it meant something significant was happening. "What's wrong, Dad?" "It's about your mother's medical bills," he began, and my heart sank. My mother, Maria, had been battling diabetes for years, and recently her condition had worsened, requiring expensive treatments that their insurance didn't fully cover. We've been trying to handle it ourselves, but the costs are getting beyond what we can manage on my salary. I'd known my parents were struggling financially, but I hadn't realized how serious the situation had become. My father was too proud to ask for help directly, but I could hear the desperation underneath his careful words. "How much do you need?" asked without hesitation. "Ryan, we're not calling to ask for money," he said quickly. "We're calling because we want you to know that we might have to sell the house." The house in South Austin, where I'd grown up, where my parents had lived for 25 years, where my mother had planted the garden she loved so much, the thought of them losing it was unbearable. "Dad, no. We'll figure this out. Let me help." "You're already helping by being successful and happy," he said. "But there's something else you should know. Jessica came by the house last week." Felt my stomach drop. "What did she want?" "She said she was worried about you, that you'd been acting strangely since you two broke up. She asked if we thought you needed help, if maybe you were having some kind of breakdown." The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. Jessica had positioned herself as the concerned ex-girlfriend, trying to plant seeds of doubt about my mental state with my own parents. It was a calculated move designed to make them question my recent life changes and possibly encourage me to get back together with her. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her that you seem happier than you've been in years," my father said firmly. "But Ryan, she seemed to know things about our financial situation that we haven't told anyone. She mentioned your mother's medical bills specifically."
Wow.
The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Jessica must have overheard conversations during the years we were together. Mental notes about my family's struggles that she was now weaponizing in her campaign to get me back. She was trying to position herself as someone who could help my family, someone they should encourage me to reconcile with. "Did she offer to help?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "She mentioned that she had some savings," my father admitted, reluctantly. "But son, even if we were desperate enough to accept money from your ex-girlfriend, which we're not, we wouldn't want you to feel obligated to get back together with someone because of financial pressure." The fact that my parents could see through Jessica's manipulation when I'd been blind to it for 3 years was both comforting and humbling. It also made me realize how much I'd grown in the months since our breakup. Old Ryan might have seen Jessica's offer as genuine kindness. The new Ryan recognized it as emotional blackmail. I drove to my parents' house that evening and spent 3 hours going through their finances with them. The situation was serious, but not insurmountable. Between my new salary and some careful budgeting, we could handle my mother's medical expenses without them having to sell their home. More importantly, we could do it without accepting any help from Jessica. But the incident had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. Not because I was tempted to reconcile with Jessica, because it reminded me how much I'd underestimated her capacity for manipulation. She wasn't just trying to win me back. She was trying to engineer a situation where my family would pressure me to return to her. I told Maya about the situation the next day over lunch. We'd been meeting daily to discuss work projects, but our conversations had evolved to include personal topics as our relationship deepened. She listened without judgment as I explained Jessica's latest scheme. "Yes, that's incredibly manipulative," Maya said when I finished, but also incredibly desperate. "She must be really struggling if she's willing to go to such lengths." "I almost feel sorry for her," I admitted. "But then I remember that she's trying to use my parents' health problems as leverage, and the sympathy disappears pretty quickly." Maya reached across the table and took my hand. "You're handling this exactly right. Don't let her drag you back into her drama." That evening, Maya and I were supposed to attend a networking event for Austin's design community. It was the kind of professional gathering that could lead to new business opportunities, and we'd both been looking forward to it. But as we were getting ready to leave the office, Maya received a phone call that changed everything. I watched her face transform as she listened to whoever was on the other end of the line. Her usual confidence seemed to crumble, replaced by shock and something that looked like fear. "I understand," she said finally. "I'll be there as soon as I can." She hung up and turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I have to go to Los Angeles immediately. My father had a heart attack. Maya's relationship with her family was complicated. Her parents had immigrated from India when she was young, and they'd never fully approved of her decision to start her own company. Instead of pursuing a traditional career in medicine or engineering, her father in particular had been distant and critical, which had driven Maya to prove herself through professional success. "How bad is it?" I asked. "Bad enough that my mother called me directly instead of waiting for me to find out through relatives," she said, grabbing her purse and heading for the door. "That's never happened before." I helped her book a flight and drove her to the airport, watching as she transformed from the confident CEO I knew into a frightened daughter worried about her father. As she prepared to board, she turned to me with an expression I'd never seen. "Before Ryan, there's something I need to tell you," she said urgently. "Something I should have mentioned before but never found the right time." "What is it?" "My father wants me to move back to Los Angeles. He's been pressuring me to sell Apex and take over his medical practice management company. I've been resisting. But if something happens to him..." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Maya, your dad is going to be fine," I said, though I had no way of knowing that. "Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." She kissed me quickly and disappeared through the security checkpoint, leaving me standing alone in the departure area with a growing sense of unease. Maya hadn't just been hiding family pressure from me. She'd been hiding the possibility that our entire relationship might have an expiration date. The next few days passed in a blur of unanswered questions and incomplete conversations. Maya called when she could, but between hospital visits and family meetings, our communication was sporadic and strained. Her father had survived the heart attack, but his recovery would be long and uncertain. Her family was using the crisis to intensify their campaign for her to return to Los Angeles permanently. I threw myself into work managing both my projects. In Maya's inner absence, the uncertainty was eating at me. I'd finally found someone who seemed to value me as much as I valued her, only to discover that external forces might pull us apart just as we were beginning to build something real. On Friday evening, as I was leaving the office after another 14-hour day, I found Jessica waiting by my motorcycle in the parking garage. She looked better than she had during our last encounter, more composed and less desperate, which somehow made her presence more unsettling. "Before you call security," she said, holding up her hands in a gesture of surrender, "I just want to talk." 5 minutes. "There's nothing to talk about, Jessica." "There is, actually. I know about Maya's father, and I know she might not be coming back." The fact that she knew about Maya's family situation made my blood run cold. Jessica had no reason to have that information unless she'd been monitoring my life more closely than I'd realized.
"How do you know that?"
"Austin's design community is smaller than you think," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Word travels fast when the CEO of one of the hottest companies in town disappears indefinitely." "What do you want, Jessica?" "I want to be here when she breaks your heart," she said simply. "Because she will, Ryan. Maybe not intentionally, But she'll choose her family over you, just like I chose Tyler over you. The difference is that I realized my mistake and came back. She won't. The cruel certainty in her voice was designed to plant seeds of doubt, and I hated that it was partially working. Maya's absence had already made me question the stability of our relationship. Jessica was just voicing fears I'd been trying to suppress. Even if that were true, I said, it wouldn't change anything between us. Maybe not, Jessica replied. But when you get tired of chasing women who don't put you first, I'll be here. I'll always be here. She walked away. It hit me this wasn't just about winning me back. Jessica was playing the long game. She was planting herself as the dependable option, waiting for me to wear out from heartbreaks and return to what was familiar, even if it was dysfunctional. The worst part? I wasn't sure she was wrong. 3 weeks later at 6 a.m., on a Sunday, Maya called from Los Angeles. I'd been lying awake, thinking about Jessica's words. The sun was barely up when my phone rang. I'm coming home, Maya said, her voice tired but firm. How's your dad? I asked, sitting up. He's going to be okay. But he'll probably never forgive me for what I'm about to do. I could hear the noise of the airport. In the background, for a few days, I was ready to stay. I almost gave up everything I built here. My mom cried. My dad guilt-tripped me from his hospital bed, and my extended family cornered me in an intervention. What changed your mind? You did, she said softly. Not directly, but the idea of you. You're the first person who ever encouraged my dreams instead of asking me to give them up. With you, I never felt like I had to earn love. You made me want to grow, not shrink. Her words hit me hard. She was describing exactly what I'd come to understand about real love, built on respect, not dependency. I told them I love them, she said, but I love myself too much to abandon the life I've worked for. And I love you too. Much to leave you in limbo while I figure out if I'm brave enough to disappoint them. 2 hours later, I met her at the airport. She looked drained, but lighter somehow. On the drive back to Austin, she told me everything about the painful talks. The pressure, the moment she realized her family's love had strings she couldn't accept anymore. I keep thinking about something you told me months ago, she said as we reached my place. How you spent years trying to earn someone's love, not realizing real love doesn't work that way. What did you realize? That I was about to repeat your mistake with my family, sacrificing my happiness to avoid disappointing people who were never going to truly accept me. That afternoon, we reconnected on every level. Maya shared how she'd built her company partly for validation, and how exhausting it was to constantly seek approval that was never freely given. I thought I was strong because I made my own path, she said as we watched the sunset from my balcony. But I was still letting their judgment control me. It was a conversation that echoed my past with Jessica, how easily anxiety gets mistaken for love, an obligation for connection. We were learning the same lesson from different directions, that healthy relationships elevate your life, they don't shrink it. That night, we made a spontaneous choice to visit my parents in San Antonio. It felt symbolic, like we were declaring something serious and intentional. My parents instantly loved her. Over dinner at a family-owned Mexican spot, Maya impressed. My dad with her business savvy and bonded with my mom over gardening. But more than anything, they saw how we looked at each other, how natural it was. She makes you happy, my mom whispered while Maya and my dad debated chili peppers. Truly happy, not just comfortable. She does, I said, watching Maya laugh. Good, my mom said. You deserve someone who chooses you every day, not someone who keeps you around just in case. That word choice stuck with me. That's what Maya gave me, and what Jessica never had. Maya was intentional. Jessica had been convenient. What? A month later, Jessica showed up one last time at a client presentation, pretending to represent a competing firm. It was a weak attempt to disrupt me, easily exposed. This is harassment, Maya said afterward. You should take legal action. No, I replied, surprising even myself. She's not dangerous, just lost. She taught me what self-respect looks like by showing me what it doesn't. She's still chasing people who don't want her, still trying to force broken things to work. She's stuck in a loop I finally escaped. Maya looked at me closely. You're really over her. I was over her the moment I realized I'd rather be alone than be someone's backup plan. But more than that, I'm grateful. Showed me what I don't want so clearly that I recognized what I do when I met you. 6 months later, Maya and I celebrated the biggest win in Apex's history with a weekend trip to the Texas Hill Country. As we sat on a porch watching fireflies flicker in the dusk, she turned to me with an intensity I hadn't seen before. "I need to tell you something," she said. My heart paused. "What is it?" "I love you," she said. "Not because you're convenient or safe or easy to fit into my life. I love you because you inspire me to be braver, kinder, and more honest. Choosing you feels like choosing the best version of myself." "I love you too," I said, pulling her close. "For all the same reasons." As we sat there under the stars, I reflected on how far I'd come. Jessica had once made me her backup plan, but in doing so, she'd taught me the most important lesson of all: self-worth. She showed me what it felt like to be devalued so deeply that I'd never accept it again. And now, with Maya, someone who chooses me first, always I understood the difference between being needed and being loved, between being chosen and being settled for. Maya didn't save me. I didn't save her. We saved ourselves, and then we found each other. That's what real love is, not two broken people trying to fix each other, but two whole people building something amazing together. Jessica was never my ending. She was the lesson that led me to everything better. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.